Jack Russell sat alone in the small break room of the USS Endeavour, staring at his half-eaten sandwich. The overhead lights hummed softly as he picked at the crust, his mind still trying to make sense of the news he had received just 30 minutes ago. "I'm just a technician," he whispered to himself, for what must have been the 10th time. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Captain Olivia Martinez stepped in, her uniform crisp and her expression concerned. She took a seat across from Jack, placing a tablet on the table between them. "How are you holding up, Russell?" she asked. Jack looked up, trying to hide his nervousness. "With all due respect, Captain, there must be someone better suited for this." Captain Martinez sighed. "I understand your concerns. I fought this decision all the way to Admiral Benson. But the Vexorians were very clear about the rules. Each visiting delegation must provide a non-military champion for their ceremony. And I was the lucky winner of the random selection," Jack said, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. "The treaty with the Vexorian Empire is the most important diplomatic mission we've undertaken in decades. Their technology, their resources, Earth, needs this alliance." Jack nodded slowly. He understood the stakes. Everyone on the ship did. The Vexorian Empire controlled a third of this galactic sector. Their advanced weapons and shield technology would give humanity the protection it desperately needed from the Kargan raiders who had been attacking Earth's outer colonies. "I know next to nothing about their culture," Jack admitted. "I fix things, Captain. I repair cooling systems and calibrate engines." Captain Martinez tapped the tablet, bringing up an image of a tall, reptilian being with emerald scales and amber eyes. "This is King Zorkath. His people value physical prowess and martial tradition. The ceremonial combat is part of every major diplomatic event they host." "Combat?" Jack's voice cracked slightly. "It's supposed to be mostly symbolic," she said, though her tone lacked conviction. "A display of cultural exchange rather than actual fighting." Jack ran a hand through his short brown hair. At 32, he was in decent shape from the physical demands of his job, but he was hardly a warrior. His 6-foot frame was lean rather than muscular, and his only combat training was the basic self-defense course required for all crew members. "What happens if I refuse?" The captain's expression grew serious. "Then we withdraw from the diplomatic summit entirely. We lose the treaty, the technology sharing, the trade routes, everything." The weight of responsibility settled on Jack's shoulders like a physical burden. He thought of his sister and her family on one of the outer colonies, living in constant fear of the next Kargan raid. How many other families were counting on this treaty without even knowing it? "When do we arrive?" he asked quietly. 3 days. We'll enter Vexorian space tomorrow morning and reach their homeworld the following evening. The ceremony is scheduled for the day after our arrival." Jack nodded slowly. "And what exactly will I have to do in this ceremony?" Captain Martinez slid her finger across the tablet, bringing up a new document. "According to their cultural attach, you'll participate in what they call the honor display. Each delegation's representative demonstrates their species' approach to martial arts. It's meant to be a cultural exchange, not actual combat." "But?" Jack prompted, sensing there was more. "But the Vexorians are warriors, and they take pride in their physical superiority. Their representative will likely be impressive. Intimidating, you mean?" She didn't deny it. "We'll have Dr. Patel give you a crash course on Vexorian physiology." "Just in case." Jack pushed his sandwich away, his appetite gone. "Just in case this cultural exchange turns into something else. I'll be honest with you, Russell. The previous 3 species who made contact with the Vexorians all reported that their representatives came back with minor injuries. Nothing serious, but enough to make a point about Vexorian dominance." Jack leaned back in his chair. "So I'm going to get beat up by an alien as a diplomatic necessity." Captain Martinez reached across the table and placed her hand on his arm. "I would take your place if I could, but they specifically excluded military personnel. They want civilians to demonstrate the natural strength of the species," they said. "And if I get hurt, Dr. Patel will be standing by. The Vingshorians allow medical teams to be present." She paused. "Jack, I know this isn't fair, but sometimes being part of the fleet means doing things we didn't sign up for." Jack looked at the captain's face, the dark circles under her eyes, the tight lines around her mouth. She had been negotiating with the Vexorian representatives for weeks, trying to secure the best possible terms for Earth. This wasn't easy for her either. "I'll do my best, Captain," he finally said. Relief flooded her features. "Thank you, Russell. Report to Conference Room 3 at 0800 tomorrow. Dr. Patel and Lieutenant Kim from Cultural Affairs will start your briefing." After she left, Jack sat alone in the break room for a long time. His thoughts drifted to his childhood in Minnesota, to the quiet streets of his hometown, the simple life he had led before joining the fleet. He had signed up to see the stars, to help build a better future by keeping the ships running that connected Earth to its colonies. He never imagined he would represent his entire species in an alien fighting ritual. When he finally returned to his quarters, Jack found a new notification on his personal tablet. Captain Martinez had granted him priority access to the ships, training facilities until they reached Vixoria. He also had clearance to review all available data on Vixorian physiology and cultural practices. Jack set his alarm for 0500. That would give him time for a workout before his briefing. He didn't have much time to prepare, but he would use every minute he had. He might be just a technician, but he was now humanity's representative to a powerful alien empire. As he lay in bed that night, trying to sleep, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this ceremonial combat than Captain Martinez had told him. The Vixorians had a reputation for being calculating and strategic. Why would they insist on civilian representatives instead of trained fighters? What was the true purpose of this honor display? Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of reptilian eyes, watching him, judging him, finding him wanting. When the alarm chimed at 0500, Jack was already awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering what awaited him on the alien world of Vixoria. The royal palace of Vexoria towered above the landscape, its massive spires reaching toward the orange sky. Jack stood at the shuttle viewport, trying to calm his racing heart as they descended toward the alien capital. The 3 days of preparation had passed too quickly. "Impressive, isn't it?" Lieutenant Kim said, joining him at the window. As the ship's cultural specialist, she had spent the past days drilling Jack on Vexorian customs. "Terrifying is the word I'd use," Jack replied honestly. Lieutenant Kim gave him a sympathetic smile. "Remember what we practiced. Eyes down when the king enters, right fist over heart during introductions, and never show your teeth when smiling." Jack nodded, mentally reviewing the long list of cultural dos and don'ts. The shuttle shuddered slightly as it entered the final landing sequence. "And the champion? What was his name again?" Jack asked. "General Drakethul," Kim said. "He's been the king's personal champion for 12 years. 12 years, Jack repeated quietly, "and I've had 3 days to prepare." The shuttle touched down with a gentle bump. Captain Martinez approached them, her dress uniform immaculate. "Ready, Russell?" Jack straightened his own formal uniform, a deep blue outfit with Earth's insignia on the chest. "As ready as I'll ever be, Captain." The shuttle door opened with a hiss, revealing a delegation of Vexorians waiting on the landing pad. Jack took a deep breath and followed Captain Martinez into the alien air. The gravity was slightly stronger than Earth's, making each step feel heavier. The air was warmer, too, with a faint scent like cinnamon and copper. Jack tried not to stare at the Vexorians, but it was difficult. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with powerful bodies covered in scales that ranged from emerald to deep jade. Their eyes were amber or gold, with vertical pupils that widened slightly as they observed the humans. A Vexorian stepped forward, wearing ornate armor that gleamed in the orange sunlight. "Captain Martinez, welcome to Vexoria. I am Sekvos, Royal, Chamberlain to His Majesty King Zorkov." The introductions continued, and Jack stood silently until the Chamberlain's gaze fell on him. "And this is your champion for tomorrow's ceremony?" Captain Martinez nodded. "Yes, this is Jack Russell, representing Earth." The Chamberlain's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked Jack up and down. There was no hiding the disappointment in his expression. "How interesting. We look forward to seeing what skills he brings to the honor display." Jack maintained a neutral expression, remembering Lieutenant Kim's warnings about showing emotion. The Vexorians considered it a sign of weakness. "Follow." The Chamberlain said. "The welcoming feast will begin shortly, and His Majesty is eager to meet the Earth delegation." They were led through vast corridors of polished stone, past murals depicting ancient battles and hunting scenes. Jack noticed that every piece of art showed Vexorians in positions of triumph or dominance. It did nothing to settle his nerves. Great Hall was enormous, with a ceiling that soared at least 50 feet above them. Long tables were arranged in a U shape, with a raised platform at the open end where a massive throne sat empty. Delegates from at least a dozen other species were already present, creating a strange mix of forms and colors. "The humans from Earth," the Chamberlain announced as they entered. Many eyes turned to observe them, some curious, others calculating. They were shown to their assigned seats. Jack found himself near the end of one table, separated from Captain Martinez and the other human delegates. He realized this was deliberate when he saw the other champions similarly placed apart from their delegations. A tall, thin alien with pale blue skin leaned toward him. "First contact with the Vexorians?" it asked in accented English. Jack nodded. "That obvious?" The alien made a sound like soft bells, its version of laughter. "I am Pellinor of the Artemian Collective. This is my 3rd diplomatic mission to Vexoria. Any advice?" Jack asked quietly. Pellinor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Yes, their champion will try to provoke you before the ceremony. Do not respond, no matter what he does." Before Jack could ask more, a horn sounded, and everyone rose to their feet. The massive doors at the end of the hall swung open, and King Zorkov entered. The Vexorian king was even more impressive than his images. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, his scales were a deep emerald with gold patterns along his crest and arms. He wore no crown, but the metallic bands around his muscular arms and neck clearly marked his status. Behind him walked another Vexorian, slightly shorter, but far more heavily muscled. Where the king moved with grace, this one stomped forward with deliberate force. His scales were darker, and a network of scars crisscrossed his face and arms. Jack didn't need an introduction to know this was General Drake Thul. The king took his seat on the throne, and the general stood at his right hand. Only then did everyone else sit down. "We welcome our guests from across the stars." King Zorkov's voice filled the hall without seeming to raise it. "Tomorrow's honor display will allow us to learn from each other's traditions and strengths." The feast began, with servers bringing platters of strange foods to each table. Jack carefully followed Lieutenant Kim's instructions about which dishes were safe for humans to eat. He was just starting to relax when a shadow fell across his plate. General Drake Thul stood beside him, holding a ceremonial cup. The conversations nearby quieted as people noticed the king's champion. "So this is Earth's best?" Drake Thul said loudly. His voice was like stones grinding together. "He looks like he would break with one hit." Jack remained silent, remembering Pelaner's warning. The general leaned closer. In my culture, we say the strength of a species can be judged by their champion. He deliberately bumped Jack's arm, causing the dark purple liquid in Jack's cup to spill across his uniform. There was a moment of silence, then scattered laughter from some of the Vexorians in the hall. Jack saw Captain Martinez halfway out of her seat, but Lieutenant Kim was holding her arm, whispering urgently. "Oops," Drakethal said with mock concern. "Your species seems quite clumsy." Jack slowly picked up a napkin and dabbed at the stain on his uniform. He kept his eyes down, not in submission, but to hide the anger that flashed through them. "Nothing to say, human? Perhaps your species lacks courage as well as strength." Jack finally looked up, meeting the general's amber eyes. He didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't frown. He simply looked at the Vexorian with a calm, steady gaze. Something flickered in Drakethul's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or irritation that his taunts hadn't produced the desired effect. The general snorted and walked away, returning to his place beside the king. Pelaner leaned close again. "Well done," the Artemian whispered. "But be careful tomorrow. He will not forget that you refused to be baited." Jack nodded, his heart still pounding from the encounter. Across the hall, he noticed the king watching him with an unreadable expression. Jack had the uncomfortable feeling that the entire incident had been planned and that tomorrow's ceremonial combat would be anything but symbolic. Sleep would not come to Jack that night. He paced the spacious guest chamber the Vexorians had provided, replaying the events of the feast in his mind. The purple stain on his uniform had been cleaned by the palace staff, but the memory of Drakethul's mockery remained fresh. "This isn't just a cultural exchange," Jack muttered to himself. After an hour of restless pacing, he decided that staying in his room would only make his anxiety worse. He needed air and space to think. The chamberlain had mentioned that guests were permitted to visit the palace gardens at any time. Jack slipped on a simple earth uniform without rank insignia and quietly left his room. The corridors were dimly lit, with only a few Vexorian guards standing at key intersections. They watched him pass, but made no move to stop him. The garden was vast, filled with strange plants that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. 3 moons hung in the sky, casting multiple shadows across the winding paths. Jack breathed deeply, finding the night air cooler and more comfortable than the heat of the day. He walked for nearly 20 minutes before realizing he wasn't alone. A hunched figure sat on a stone bench near a small pond. As Jack approached, he saw it was a Vexorian, much older than any he had seen so far. The alien scales had faded to a pale green, and his once powerful frame had grown thin with age. Jack was about to turn away when the old Vexorian spoke. "You are the human champion, the one who did not rise to Drakethul's bait." Jack stopped, surprised. "Yes, I'm Jack Russell." The old Vexorian gestured to the empty space on the bench. "Join me, human. I am Silvex, once chief advisor to King Zorkath." "Father." Jack hesitated, then sat down. "You're up late, sir." "As are you," Silvex replied. "Though I suspect we both have good reasons for our sleeplessness." "I'm thinking about tomorrow's ceremony," Jack admitted. Silvex made a sound that might have been a laugh. "The honor display, a grand name for a cruel tradition." Jack turned to look at the old advisor. "What do you mean?" "Let me ask you this, human. What did your diplomats tell you about the ceremony?" "That it's a cultural exchange, a demonstration of each species' approach to martial arts." Silvex shook his head slowly. "It is much more than that. It is King Zorkath's way of establishing dominance before treaty negotiations begin." A cold feeling settled in Jack's stomach. Dominance? For generations, Vexorian kings have used the honor display to demonstrate their species' superiority. Drakethul will not just demonstrate fighting techniques. He will attempt to humiliate you to make an example of human weakness. But the captain said injuries are usually minor, Jack protested. Minor, yes. Drakethul is too skilled to accidentally kill or seriously harm you. But he will make sure you, and by extension, your entire species, lose face before all the gathered delegates. Jack stood up, anger rising in him. This is just a setup? A rigged game to make humans look weak? Precisely, Sylvex said, calmly. Every new species that seeks alliance with Vexoria goes through this. Those who withdraw their champion lose all negotiating leverage. Those who participate suffer humiliation and then accept less favorable treaty terms. I need to tell Captain Martinez, Jack said, turning to leave. She likely already suspects the truth, Sylvex said. But what can she do? Withdraw you and lose the treaty? Or let you participate, knowing you will be humiliated, but that some deal will still be possible? Jack's shoulders slumped as the reality of the situation sank in. So either way, Earth loses. Not necessarily, Sylvex said quietly. Jack turned back, frowning. What do you mean? The old Vexorian looked around carefully, then gestured for Jack to come closer. I have watched King Zorkath turn a once honorable tradition into a political tool. His father valued true cultural exchange. The son uses it to bully and dominate. And you don't approve? Jack guessed. I believe it will lead our empire to ruin. We need allies, not servants. But that is not the Vexorian way under Zorkath. Sylvex leaned forward. I cannot change my king's mind. But perhaps I can level the field just a little. How? Vexorians are physically superior to humans in most ways. Stronger, faster, with natural armor. But we have one vulnerability that few outsiders know about. Sylvex touched the back of his neck, just below where it joined his skull. Here, there is a nerve cluster. A precisely placed strike causes temporary paralysis. Jack stared at the old advisor. Why are you telling me this? Because I believe true strength comes from knowledge and wisdom, not just physical power. Because I have watched my people's honor fade under a king who values dominance over cooperation. Sylvex's amber eyes seemed to glow in the moonlight. And because you showed restraint and dignity when Drakethul tried to provoke you. That is a kind of strength my people have forgotten. Even if what you're saying is true, I couldn't possibly land a strike like that on someone like Drakethul, Jack said. He's a trained warrior. You are a technician, yes? You work with your hands, fixing precise machinery? Jack nodded. That's my job. Then you already have the skills needed. It is about precision, not power. Sylvex stood up slowly, his joints creaking. Come, there are still hours before dawn. I will show you. For the next 3 hours, in a secluded corner of the garden, the old Vexorian taught Jack. They used a statue as a practice target, with Sylvex guiding Jack's hand to the exact spot and showing him how to strike with 2 fingers, applying pressure. In just the right way. It is not about strength, Sylvex repeated often. It is about knowledge and precision. By the time the first sun began to rise, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold, Jack had practiced the move hundreds of times. His fingers were sore, but his movements had become fluid and automatic. Will this really work? Jack asked, as they prepared to return to their rooms. If you can land the strike, yes, but that is the challenge. Drakethul is fast and experienced. He will not make it easy. Jack nodded, understanding the odds were still against him. Why help me? Won't you get in trouble? Sylvex looked toward the palace, his expression sad. I am old, and I have fallen from favor. What more can they take from me? He turned back to Jack. Remember, human, one perfect strike is worth more. been 100 powerful blows. Wait for your moment. As they parted ways, Jack felt a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. He now had a chance, slim as it might be, to avoid humiliation. But using this secret knowledge felt almost like cheating. It's not cheating, he told himself as he slipped back into his room. It's just another kind of strength. Knowledge over force. A few hours later, as servants arrived with breakfast and fresh clothing for the ceremony, Jack felt a strange calm settle over him. Win or lose, he would face the challenge with dignity. And perhaps, just perhaps, one strike could change everything. The arena was massive, far larger than Jack had imagined. Circular in shape, with rising tiers of stone seats, it could hold thousands of spectators. And today, it seemed every seat was filled. Vixorians made up most of the crowd, their scales gleaming in the bright sunlight. But representatives from 24 other species were also present, seated in special sections according to their diplomatic rank. Jack stood in a small waiting area beneath the arena, trying to control his breathing. The sounds of the crowd above were muffled but still overwhelming. "How are you feeling?" Captain Martinez asked, her face tight with concern. "Like I might throw up," Jack admitted honestly. Dr. Patel approached with a small medical scanner. "Your vitals are elevated, but within normal parameters." The doctor hesitated. "Jack, remember what we discussed. If things get too intense, there's no shame in yielding. The treaty is important, but not at the cost of serious injury." Jack nodded, though he wondered if yielding too quickly would cause as much diplomatic damage as not participating at all. He thought of Sylvex's lessons from the night before, the hours spent practicing that one precise strike. Lieutenant Kim entered the waiting area. It's time. The king has taken his seat, and the ceremony is about to begin. Jack straightened. His uniform, a simple blue outfit with Earth's emblem on the chest. No armor, no padding. The rules specified that champions would wear only the standard clothing of their people. "Remember your training," Dr. Patel said. "Stay light on your feet. Don't try to match his strength." Jack nodded again, unable to find words. He followed Lieutenant Kim up a long ramp that led to the arena floor. The noise grew louder with each step, until they emerged into blinding sunlight and a wall of sound. The crowd roared as Jack stepped onto the sandy floor of the arena. He squinted against the light, taking in the sea of faces surrounding him. In a raised section directly across from him sat King Zor-Kath on an ornate throne. The monarch's expression was one of amused interest, like someone about to watch an entertaining but predictable show. A Vexorian announcer's voice boomed across the arena, speaking first in the hissing language of the Vexorians, then in the common Galactic tongue used for diplomacy. "The honor display will now commence. Representing the Empire of Visoria, the king's own champion, General Drakethul." From the opposite side of the arena, a large gate opened. Drakethul strode out, his dark green scales catching the sunlight. He wore minimal armor, just shoulder, guards and forearm protectors, displaying his confidence and disdain for any potential threat. The crowd erupted in cheers and roars as he raised his arms in acknowledgement. "And representing the planet Earth, Jack Russell?" The response to Jack's name was more subdued, curious murmurs and a few scattered claps from the non-Vexorian sections of the crowd. He saw Captain Martinez and the Earth delegation in their assigned area, their faces tense with worry. Announcer continued, "As tradition dictates, each champion may select one weapon from the royal armory for this display." A Vixorian attendant approached Jack, carrying a large case. Inside were various weapons, blades of different sizes, staff-like. Objects and things Jack couldn't even identify. He remembered Lieutenant Kim's advice to choose something defensive, something that would show respect for Vexorian traditions while protecting himself. Across the arena, Drakethul selected a curved blade about 3 feet long. He swung it in. A graceful arc, drawing appreciative sounds from the crowd. When the attendant reached Jack, he looked at the array of weapons, then made his decision. "I choose no weapon," he said clearly. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. The attendant looked confused, speaking rapidly to someone off to the side. Finally, he turned back to Jack. "You wish to face the general unarmed?" "That is correct," Jack said. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Jack caught sight of King Zorkath leaning forward on his throne, his expression shifting from amusement to curiosity. The announcer's voice rang out again. "The Earth Champion declines a weapon. The display will proceed according to tradition, until one champion yields or the king declares an end." Drakethul laughed, the sound carrying across the arena. He said something in Vexorian that caused the nearby spectators to laugh as well. Jack didn't need a translation to understand the mockery. The two champions were directed to the center of the arena, where they stood facing each other about 10 feet apart. Up close, Drakethul was even more intimidating, nearly 8 feet. Tall, with muscles that rippled beneath his scales and scars that told stories of many victories. "A shame you traveled so far just to be humiliated, human," Drakethul said quietly, just for Jack to hear. "But don't worry, I'll make it quick." "Mostly." Jack said nothing, focusing on controlling his breathing and keeping his stance relaxed but ready. He recalled Sylvex's words, "Wait for your moment." A Vexorian official stepped between them, raising a ceremonial staff. "Champions, honor your king." Both Jack and Drakethul turned toward King Zorkath and placed their right fists over their foe. Hearts. The king nodded once, and the official stepped back quickly. "Begin," the announcer shouted. Drakethul didn't move immediately. He circled slowly, blade held loosely at his side, studying Jack with narrowed eyes. Jack turned with him, keeping the same distance between them. No weapon, no armor, not even proper fighting stance. Drakethul called out, loud enough for nearby spectators to hear. "Is this how humans show respect for our traditions? By making a mockery of them?" Jack remained silent, watching the general's movements, looking for patterns. The Vexorian was clearly trying to bait him into making the first move. In the diplomatic section, Captain Martinez watched with her hands clenched tight. "What is he doing?" She whispered to Lieutenant Kim. "I don't know," Kim replied. But the Vexorians seem intrigued. Drakethul finally lost patience with Jack's silence. "Very well, human. If you won't make this interesting, I'll end it now." The general charged forward with shocking speed, his blade raised high. Jack stood perfectly still, seemingly frozen. In place. Gasps rose from the Earth delegation, certain they were about to witness a slaughter. At the last possible second. As Drakethul began to bring his blade down, Jack stepped to the side. The movement was so smooth, so perfectly timed, that the general's momentum carried him past his target. And in that split second, Jack's hand shot out, 2 fingers extended, aimed at the exact spot Sylvex had shown him. The nerve cluster. At the base of the Vexorian's skull, Jack felt his fingers connect, felt the slight give of scales and the firm pressure on the precise point. Then he stepped back, hands lowered, waiting. Drakethul froze mid-stride, his blade still raised. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his eyes widened in shock. The blade slipped from his fingers, clattering to the arena floor. His massive body shuddered once, then collapsed in a heap of muscle and scale. The arena went completely silent. The silence in the arena was complete. Thousands of spectators sat frozen in disbelief. Jack stood calmly beside the fallen form of General Drakethul, his hands now clasped behind his back in a respectful pose. The general lay motionless on the sand, his eyes wide open and blinking. the only part of his body he could still move. Captain Martinez and the Earth delegation stared in shock. Dr. Patel's medical scanner hung forgotten in his hand. Lieutenant Kim's mouth had dropped open, all her cultural training momentarily forgotten not in his royal box. King Zorkath slowly rose to his feet. His face showed no emotion as he stared down at the scene below. The entire arena held its breath, waiting for the king's reaction. Jack kept his eyes lowered, showing respect rather than triumph. His heart pounded in his chest, but he maintained his calm exterior. Sylvex had taught him not just the strike, but how to behave afterward. No celebration, no boasting, no sign of superiority. The silence stretched for 10 more seconds. 20. 30. Then, King Zorkath did something that shocked everyone present. He began to laugh. It started as a low rumble, then grew into a full, hearty sound that echoed across the arena. The Vixorians in the crowd looked at each other in confusion. Their king rarely showed such genuine emotion. The human understands. Zorkath's voice boomed across the arena. Truly understands. The king gestured to his guards, who rushed forward to attend to Drake Thul. Jack stepped back, giving them space. He knew from Sylvex that the paralysis would wear off in about 10 minutes, leaving no permanent damage. Come forward, human champion, the king called. Jack walked across the sand to stand below the royal box. He placed his right fist over his heart and bowed his head. Following protocol, King Zorkath descended from his box, stepping onto the arena floor, something no one could remember a Vexorian monarch ever doing during an honor display. He approached Jack, towering over the human by more than 2 feet. You chose no weapon, the king said, his voice now lower but still carrying to the nearby spectators. I needed none, your majesty, Jack replied simply. And you do not celebrate your victory, or mock your fallen opponent. That would dishonor both him and me. The king's amber eyes studied Jack intently. How did you learn of the nerve strike? It is one of our most closely guarded secrets. Jack hesitated, unsure whether to mention Sylvex. But before he could decide, the king continued, no matter. The important thing is not how you learned it, but how you used it. Zorkath turned to address the crowd. This human has demonstrated the highest form of combat wisdom. Victory without boasting, strength without brutality, knowledge over force. The crowd murmured, uncertain how to react to this unexpected turn of events. For too long, the king continued, we Vixorians have measured strength only by muscle and scale. We have forgotten that true power can take many forms. He turned back to Jack. You are a warrior, human. Jack shook his head slightly. No, your majesty. I am a technician. I fix things. I use precision and knowledge, not strength. And that, said the king, is precisely the lesson I needed to be reminded of. To everyone's astonishment, King Zorkath reached out and grasped Jack's right arm, raising it high in the traditional Vexorian gesture of victory. A hesitant cheer began in one section of the crowd, then spread until the entire arena was roaring in the diplomatic section. Captain Martinez sat back in her seat, letting out a long breath of relief. Did he just win over the entire Vexorian empire with one move? Lieutenant Kim shook her head in wonder. I think he did more than that. I think he just changed their entire perspective on strength. By now, the medical team had carried General Drakethul from the arena. The paralysis would be wearing off soon, and Jack wondered how the general would react to his defeat. The king lowered Jack's arm, but kept one massive hand on his shoulder. The treaty discussions will begin tomorrow, he said, quietly enough that only Jack could hear. I think your people will find we are more reasonable than expected. Thank you, your majesty, Jack replied. No human. Thank you for reminding an old warrior that there are many kinds of strength in this galaxy. The king paused, then added, and perhaps you could introduce me to whoever taught you that strike. I suspect I know who it was, and I have missed his counsel." Jack smiled slightly. "I would be honored to arrange that, Your Majesty." The ceremonial gong sounded, signaling the end of the honor display. As Jack walked back toward the Earth delegation, delegates from other species reached out to touch his arm or nod in respect. The Artemian, Pelanar, made the sound like soft bells that Jack now recognized as laughter. "Well played, human," Pelanar said. "In one move, you've improved the position of every species here." Captain Martinez met him at the edge of the arena. "Russell, that was... I don't even have words." "Just did what needed to be done, Captain," Jack said, suddenly feeling exhausted as the adrenaline began to fade. "The Admiral won't believe this," she said, shaking her head. "None of them will." Dr. Patel ran a scanner over Jack. "You're fine physically, but you need rest." "That was quite a performance." "Not a performance," Jack corrected quietly. "Just a different kind of strength." 3 days later, as the USS Endeavour prepared to depart Victoria, Jack stood in the shuttle bay with Captain Martinez. The treaty negotiations had concluded in record time, with terms far more favorable to Earth than anyone had dared hope for. "I still can't believe it," Martinez said. "We came expecting to fight for every small concession. Instead, they're offering technology sharing, military protection, and trade rights that exceed our best-case projections." Jack smiled. "Sometimes one moment can change everything. The Admiral is putting you in for a commendation." "Possibly a medal." Jack shook his head. "That's not necessary, Captain. I'm happy to get back to my regular duties." Martinez studied him for a moment. "You know, there's an opening in the diplomatic corps. After this, you'd be a natural." "With all due respect, Captain, I prefer fixing machines to fixing interstellar relations." Jack smiled, "But thank you for the offer." The shuttle bay doors opened, and a small Vexorian delegation entered. At their center walked King Zorkath himself, with Silvex at his side. The old advisor looked rejuvenated, his posture straighter, and his eyes brighter. "We come to bid farewell to the Earth delegation," the king announced, "and to its remarkable champion." Jack stepped forward and placed his fist over his heart. "The honor was mine, Your Majesty." The king presented Jack with a small metal emblem, a Vexorian symbol that Lieutenant Kim had told him represented wisdom and strength in balance. "The first of many cultural exchanges between our peoples," Zorkath said. As the farewells concluded and the Vexorians departed, Silvex lingered for a moment. "You have done more than secure a treaty, human," the old advisor said quietly. "You have planted a seed of change in the Vexorian Empire. Peking has already ordered reforms to the honor display for future delegations." "I just applied what you taught me," Jack said. Silvex shook his head. "I taught you the strike. You showed us all how to use it with honor and humility." He placed a weathered hand on Jack's shoulder. "One perfect strike can indeed change everything, especially when delivered with the right spirit." After the Vexorians left, Jack returned to the maintenance bay. He picked up his tools and slid under a coolant regulator that had been giving the engineering team trouble. As he worked, adjusting the delicate mechanisms with practiced precision, he smiled to himself. Just a technician who fixes things. Sometimes machines, sometimes relationships between species. Either way, it was all about finding the precise point where a small adjustment could make everything work together perfectly.